How do you make yourself vulnerable enough to step close to a loved one or a friend who is in the midst of grief? What is it that we're supposed to say? What's something that can be helpful for them? How do we respond to where they're at? It can be scary for some people. Some people will avoid it altogether for fear of making things worse. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about it. Talk about a few different things that will be helpful, perspective, and also some things to hopefully not do, to avoid when supporting your loved one who's in grief. My name is Brian West. Welcome to Heart of the Father. I want to thank you for joining me again on this video. And this video is a bit of a follow-up to the video I did that actually had to do with friendship in grief. Which was really about how some friends get closer and some get a bit more distant in the aftermath of tragedy, and why that is. But I did have a person reach out to me and say, well, what if I have somebody who I'd like to support? What is a good way to do that? I touched on that a bit in the friendship video. But we're going to set this whole video aside to just really speak to people who are wondering how they can support in a beneficial, helpful way somebody who's grieving, who's mourning. So thank you for joining me again. And if you're new to this channel, I welcome you, invite you to subscribe. And if this would be valuable to someone, I recommend that you share it. So I want to start with a couple scriptures that are pretty important. Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. John 2:13, then they sat on the ground with him, and for 7 days and nights no one said a word to him because they saw how great his suffering was. And then, of course, John 11:35, Jesus wept. 2 Corinthians 1:3-4, praise be to God the Father, our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of compassion, God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any troubles with the comfort we ourselves received from God. So I lay those scriptures out initially to show that it's biblical and appropriate to support the people that we love in their place of complete brokenness. And that's an important thing to consider, because I think that it could be assumed that, this idea of it's best to leave them alone and allow them to kind of go through this journey themselves. They don't want to see anyone. They don't want to talk to anyone. And I think I should give them space. But of course, from these scriptures, we understand it's absolutely appropriate, encouraged to comfort those who are mourning, to be with them. The real question then becomes, well, how do you do that? Grief is such a terrible thing that people experience, the trauma and the shock of losing someone, especially if it's a tragedy, a tragic situation. And so there's a few things that we can look at for how I think to come alongside a friend or a family member that can be very beneficial, that meets them in that place that they're in, and I can, just speaking from my own experience as well, in the aftermath of loss, I was really kind of in a state of shock. I didn't know what I wanted, and I didn't know what I needed. And I've talked about this before, that I simply, there were things that I forgot to do. The everyday mundane things that have to get done, while you're grieving and you're mourning. And I think a lot of people do know this part. Like, I want to help, I want to be there. And so we'll talk about that real quick too. So we have here in James 1:19 the recommendation: everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Again in Colossians 3:12-13, therefore, as God's chosen people, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness and patience. Bear with each other. Ephesians 4:29, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. So a few, in terms of empathy, what are some things that can be said that would be helpful? And I think this is important because sometimes we don't know what to say. What do you say to someone in that place? So condolences, I'm so sorry, shows a relational piece that you can understand and hear what's going on with them. And just I'm here to sit with you. I just want to be near you. Just want to be with you. We don't have to do anything, say anything. I want to sit with you. And I know that in my grief, I didn't feel like talking. I didn't have the energy to do it. But it was welcomed to have a presence, not necessarily to do anything. And we'll talk about that and the do not do's a little bit later. Just not disappearing. Sometimes it can be helpful to ask, what can I do this next hour? What can I do for you in this hour? Sometimes there's different things that need to get done that a person might forget. Things like meals. We've talked about oftentimes churches will organize like a meal train, something like that to help. That was really helpful for me, for us. Another thing is, rides or any kind of childcare help, errands. Pet care is another one. House chores, memorial tasks. That's really hard. I had a loss I experienced where the family had to do the memorial tasks, come like rapidly in a way, and it was really rough. I think it was really hard to and I helped in the way that I could, but it's just really tough to have to be in a place where you are mourning and you also have to think about honoring the person you lost and just the logistics and all of the administrative things, immediately, right after. That's a really hard thing to try and do. So assisting with memorial tasks, the administration of someone as they need to get bills paid, things like that. So these are different ways that you might be able to help, Relational help, so just checking in, trying to help a person remember key dates. Just going on walks can be helpful, believe it or not. I think consent is big. You want to make sure that you're not moving into a place that a person, is kind of, saying, not accepting. So that's important too. So these are different ways, right? Hebrews 10:24 says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, but encouraging one another. So in 1 Thessalonians 5:14, we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle and disruptive, encourage the disheartened, help the weak, and be patient with everyone. So those are some ideas for how you can approach a friend or a family member, and how, if you feel that love, you want to do something and you don't know what. Those are some ideas. I think this part might be a little bit more helpful, which is it would be helpful to know what not to do, what kind of things to avoid that really aren't helpful. And this is just based on my own experience, really. Talking about timelines, this idea, some people might say, preaching timelines, but this idea of, a subtle way would be, this will only last a little while. This time will pass. Or the extreme, which is, you should be getting over this by now. As horrible as that sounds, some people might want to throw that out there as kind of like an encouragement. It really doesn't come off well in the period of mourning and grief. The other thing is explaining the mystery. Why a tragedy happened. Little things, platitudes like, God must have needed another angel. I understand the what the spirit is behind that, trying to do, but in the aftermath, it's not helpful. I think that the mystery of why it happened needs to really point to just the sovereignty of God, but in the moment, it's really not something that's productive to even discuss, unless the individual wants to discuss it, right? I think that oftentimes we want to try and relate to make the person feel less lonely. So offering our own experiences and stories, which can tend to try and emphasize, centering this discussion on you, which can take away or diminish the experience of the individual at hand. And so, kind of putting the focus on yourself. So that's one thing to probably try and avoid. I think kind of this, 21 Jump Street interrogation thing is a little strange too. The idea to, I think some people respond in different ways, but the interrogation of details, like tell me exactly what happened, like what this and that, and then of course the idea of kind of betraying the trust of proximity, where a person might share news that without permission to others. That's something that you would want to avoid as well. And I think the last one that I'll kind of leave with is like vanishing after a week. I think that kind of checking in periodically is really helpful. I thought that was really helpful for me, because things get real quiet real soon in those first few weeks and in those first few months. And so trying to keep lines open and stay connected, even if it's just for the sake of staying connected, is beneficial. So I think the idea of when we consider these, the idea of being afraid of doing wrong, might be almost like a fear of our own grief kind of surfacing, that feeling of helplessness. What if I cry? There's people that would be so overwhelmed, and I don't think that that's wrong. But we do have these scriptures to help us as we support and come alongside people who are in this terrible place. Joshua 1:9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous, and don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. The Lord will be with you wherever you go. So we do have this scripture to help us as we come alongside people who are grieving, and to draw near to them. Proverbs 11, a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. So hopefully these have given some helpful ideas for individuals as they ask this question. How can I help and support a person who has experienced a tragic situation? And I think that wanting to be close to them and be helpful and just be a presence, you can never go wrong with that. Respecting their wishes, respecting privacy, offering to do some helpful support. These things can never be wrong. And so hopefully this is encouragement to you and to all of you who are in the midst right now. God bless you. The Lord is near the brokenhearted, and He's with those crushed in spirit. He rescues those crushed in spirit. I want to thank you for joining me on this video, and I look forward to see you on the next one. God bless. Bye-bye.